Welcome back. The cluster is now ready. Let's minimize the Cloud Shell and click on Monitor. In the Monitor blade, under Insights, you can see Containers as the option. Let's click on Containers. There are two tabs here, Monitored Cluster and Unmonitored Cluster. So if you have a AKS cluster running without monitoring enabled, you will see the cluster here, and you can also see a button to enable the monitoring directly from here rather using Azure CLI. So this is the option to enable monitoring to an existing cluster from the portal. Now let's click on the monitor cluster. This is the one which we provision. The cluster name is my AKS cluster. Cluster type is AKS. Version 1.22.11. The status is healthy. Nodes 1/1. This cluster is having single node. Node is in healthy state. User ports, there is no user ports provision as of now. System ports, there are 13 system ports running onto this cluster. Let's click on the cluster. It will bring you onto AKS Blade Insights under monitoring. Here we can see some monitoring charts with respect to node CPU utilization, node memory utilization, node count, active port count. CPU utilization is showing CPU percentage being used by nodes. Node memory utilization is showing memory uses for the node. And we have node count, which is basically number of node part of your cluster, that is 1. Active port count, so it is showing you 13 as the system ports running into this cluster. Now let's click on the next tab, that is reports. Here we can see some reports with respect to node monitoring, resource monitoring, billing, and networking. I will explain you each one of these in detail, but before that, let's navigate onto other tabs. Let's click on nodes. It is showing number of nodes part of your AKS cluster. This is showing the number of containers running inside this cluster, the uptime of the cluster, and status is okay. Now let's click on the next tab, that is controllers. In this tab, we can see all the controller running as pod inside my cluster, like connectivity agent, OMS agent, metric server. So these are the system pods running under kube-system namespace, and these are the controllers. Now let's click on containers. So this tab is showing all the containers running inside the cluster. The status of all the containers is showing as okay. And we have pod corresponding to these containers, the node on which these containers are running, restarts if these are restarted at any point of time, the uptime of each container, trend, it is showing the trend also there. Now let's click back onto the cluster. Let's click on the recommended alerts preview. Here we get an option to enable alert notification based on certain rules like completed job count, container CPU percentage, container working set memory percentage, daily data cap breach, failed port count, node CPU percentage, right? So we can enable alert notification for each one of them. Let's try node CPU percentage. Let's enable it. It is going to create an alert rule based on this metric. Alert rule has been created. Now let's click on the view in alerts. And now if you click on alerts rule, it will show you the rule which we just created. Let's refresh it. It's there now. Let's click onto this rule. So this is the scope here, my AKS cluster. Inside resource group, my resource group. Under condition, we have a condition. Whenever the average CPU usage percentage is greater than 80%, then this rule should be triggered. Under action, there is no action group defined yet, but we can create one. Let's create one. There is already one action group present. I can use that, or I can create new action group. Let's create a new action group. This is my subscription. This is the resource group. Let's create the rule name here. Click next notification. Notification type, I'm going to choose email, SMS, message, push, voice. I'm going to choose email. Let's click on OK. Let me just give it a name. Click next actions. Action type. I'm not going to choose any action here. Let's click on next tags. I'm not going to add any tag. Click on next review plus create and create this action group. Action group has been created and assigned to the rule. Let's do a small modification here. I'll just click on the condition name. Let's make it a bit aggressive so that we can see the alert soon. Let's make it just 10%, though this is not recommended for production. I just want to see the alert soon, so I just change that to 10. Let's click on done. So now if average CPU percentage is greater than 10%, it is going to send a email notification to my email address. That's it. Now let's go ahead and save it. Alert rule has been updated. Now let's go ahead and open the Cloud Shell once again. Let's download the credential to connect to cluster. AZ AKS get credentials -- resource group, my resource group -- name my AKS cluster -- override. So now I should be able to run kubectl get ports command. No resources found in default namespace, that is expected. Let's see the ports running inside namespace kube-system. Please make sure that you have OMS agent running that is deployed as part of your monitoring add-on. Now let's deploy a pod which will consume some CPU resources. I have a sample definition here. So this is the pod I'm going to create. The name of the pod is CPU-demo. The container name, this is the image which I'm using, wish/stress. Under resources, we have some limits and requests defined. Under args, we mentioned 4 as the number of CPU. Let's go ahead and deploy this pod. Pod has been created. Yeah, it is running. It will put some CPU pressure onto our cluster, and that should trigger the alert notification. We can run kubectl top nodes command to see the CPU utilization. Currently it is 6%. Let's wait for some time. It will increase to more than 10%, and that should trigger the alert. Let's rerun the command and see the current CPU utilization. Now it is reached to 50%. It should have sent notification to my email address. Let me open my email. I received this email. In this email, I have alert rule description, rule ID, resource ID, metric namespace, dimensions, time aggregation, period, value, operator, threshold, criterion, type. This alert is showing me high CPU utilization onto my cluster, my AKS cluster. All right, now let's go back to Azure portal. Let's minimize Cloud Shell. Let's close this and let's close this also. Here also you can see the alert which is fired. Let's refresh it. There is a alert which is fired. Let's close this page also. We are back to the insights. So this is how you can create multiple alert notification onto your AKS cluster. Now let's go ahead and click on reports. The first one is node monitoring. Under node monitoring, we have disk capacity, disk IO, and GPU. Let's click on disk capacity. This page is showing me all the disks attached to the cluster with its health status. So I have total 4 disks. All 4 disks are healthy currently. There is no critical disk or unhealthy disk. It is showing disk uses in the form of chart as well. Let's close this. We have disk IO. Under disk IO, we can see the number of disks attached to the cluster, basically nodes. We have SDA1, SDB1. This is the read bytes per second, read bytes per second trend, write byte per second, write bytes per second trend, percentage disk busy, percentage disk busy trend. You can publish these charts onto your dashboards also. You can just click here and publish these charts onto your dashboard. Let's close this. Click on the GPU. Currently, there is no GPU report because the node which I'm running, it is not GPU, it is CPU based. Let's close it. Under resource monitoring, we can see deployments. Let's click on deployments. It will show you deployment status. I have 5 healthy deployments running onto this cluster. Those are basically running in kube-system namespace. Those are all ready, up to date, and available. There is no failure yet. Let's close this. We have workload detail. Let's click on workload detail. We have max CPU usage by port, max memory usage by port. Let's click on pod/container status. Pod restart trend. There is no pod which is getting restarted. Container restart trend. There is no container which is getting restarted. Everything seems to be working fine. Let's click on Kubernetes Events. Under Kubernetes Events, there is one warning that is with respect to this pod Azure-IP-mask-agent-CFQRF, and that is basically for failed mount. This is the event message. It seems to be timed out, waiting for the condition. You can deep dive into this issue from terminal using kubectl commands and get the reason why it was failure. Under persistent volumes, there is no persistent volume as of now onto this cluster, so that's the reason it is empty. Let's close it. We have kubelet. So this is kubelet monitoring. We can see number of running ports 14, storage volume 9, config error, there is no error. You can click on operations. Under operations, it is showing you the node, total operations 1, total error 0, success percentage 100%, create container, it was 100% success, pull image 100% success, remove underscore container, it was 100% success, right? So there is nothing failure. Let's click on performance. This tab is showing CPU and memory uses. That's it. Let's close this. Then we have persistent volume detail. If you have any persistent volume, you can see the detail of persistent volume from this report. Let's click on it. I don't have any persistent volume. That's the reason it is all 0. Let's close this. Next is billing. Under billing, we have data uses. Let's click on here. This is the overview, container insights billing uses. This workbook provides you a summary and source for billing data collected by Container Insight solution. So whatever the data is being collected using Container Insight solution, it is showing the charges of that data. Let's click on by table. Billable data from Container Insight. So there are some logs coming from PERF, Insights metrics, container inventory, kube pod inventory, kube node inventory, kube services, kube events, container node inventory, container logs. So this is the amount of data which is collected by Container Insight. Let's click on by namespaces. So it is just showing the different view onto this tab. Let's click on by log source. Here it is showing in the form of charts. You can analyze this. Let's click on by diagnostic master node. There is nothing in here. All right, so this is all about data uses. Let's close it. Then we have networking report. We have npm configuration. Under npm configuration, we can see network policies, IP tables rule, IP sets. I don't have any enabled for now. That's the reason these are all empty. Let's click on IP sets entry. There is nothing. Let's click on runtime. There is nothing there too. Right, so this is all about npm configuration. Let's close this. Next is about network. Let's click on network. Under network, we can see the node and associated interface ETH0. It is showing sent bytes per second, sent bytes per second trend, received bytes per second, received byte per second trend, errors out per second trend, and if there is any error, it will show you here. Let's close this. So this is all about reports. We have already seen nodes and controllers and containers. That's it for this lecture. I hope you liked it. Thank you.